Hi, this is Eric Lofholm. Welcome to part two of my life story. The person that this video is for, you're a student of mine, you're a client of mine, and you just want to get to know me a little bit better, or you're considering becoming a client, you're interested in my story. I don't think that my story is all that particularly interesting. I just know that with my mentors, I've always enjoyed hearing some of their struggles and hearing some of the backstory. And so I decided to do this video series for any of you that do want to get to know me a little bit better and know some of my history. So I just now moved to San Diego. It is, let's see here, 1996. And Jairus and I, we've been married now for 4 years. We don't have any kids. She is going to college at University of Phoenix, and she's also working there. And I'm now working for Tony Robbins. When I applied for a job with Tony, I just wanted to get my foot in the door. And so I applied for an entry-level telemarketing position. I'd already been trained by Dr. Moyne at this point. I'd had many months where I'd made over $10,000 in a month. I had done some professional speaking, but I just wanted to get my foot in the door. They didn't know, when I say they, the Tony Robbins organization, they were not aware of my extensive sales background. They didn't ask me in the interview. It just never came up. I kind of came in under the radar. And I was doing appointment setting. And we were calling New York at the time, calling businesses. So the shift started at 6 a.m. and we'd call until 3, and we were expected to make between 100 and 200 calls a day, booking 3 appointments for the Tony Robbins speakers that were living in New York at the time. So I did that for a period of time, and then I got promoted to become the manager of that department. And then I had a falling out with the company, and I ended up quitting. And I went home, and I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do next. I thought, okay, I'm going to start my training company. So I set out to start a company called Quantum Leap International. And the whole concept is I was going to teach people how to create quantum leaps in their life. And I realized I did not have what it took at that point in my life. I didn't have the discipline to run a successful company. And so I was dabbling and I was running out of money. And I ended up going to work for Tony Martinez for a little bit, one of my earlier mentors. He's still a mentor to this day. And I had a good run with Tony Martinez. And it had been about 8 months since I left the Tony Robbins company. And when I left, I'd had a falling out with the CEO. And I'd quit. So one of the gentleman who ran the speaker team, his name is Dan Lear. And Dan invited me to dinner. And so Jairus and I went to dinner with Dan. And he said, why don't you come back and work for Tony again? And you can come out in the field and be a speaker for Tony. We're down a guy. We're doing an LA cycle. Now, a cycle is a 2 to 3 month marketing cycle where they're promoting the upcoming seminar, in this case, in Los Angeles. And I was living in San Diego at the time. He's like, why don't you come and do one cycle, come up to LA for a couple months. We could really use you. I said, Dan, you don't understand. He goes, what? I go, I'm not welcome back there. He goes, what do you mean? I go, Dan, I left on bad terms with the CEO. So if you go back to them and say you want to rehire me, they're going to give you a big absolutely not. He can't come back and work here. So Dan goes, well, let me ask you this, Eric. If I can get you back, if they'll agree to hire you, will you come back? I go, sure, I'll do the cycle, but they're not gonna allow me back. So Dan calls his boss, says, I'm having dinner with Eric Lofholm, and he told me the story about how he left on bad terms, and I want him to come do the cycle. He won't be working in the corporate office. I'll make sure he's on his best behavior, or whatever he said. Can we hire him back? And Dan's boss goes, sure. So that night, I ended up going to one of the Tony Robbins Christmas parties. One of the executives was having a Christmas party. And so I ended up going to that party, and they hired me back. And so I did this cycle in LA. And the plan was to do that cycle, and then I would go back to San Diego, where Jairus was in college at the time. And Jairus didn't come with me to LA because it's about 2-hour drive, so I would spend some time in San Diego and some time in LA, and we would still see each other quite a bit. Well, then the cycle ended, and I wanted to continue being on the road. And so I went back to Jairus, and I persuaded her to drop out of college, which was a pretty big sale. And we went on the road together. And so we were on the road for another about 18 months. We went up to the Bay Area. We went to Philadelphia, Dallas, Texas, Seattle, Washington. It was fun being in Seattle. Jairus' mom was living in Seattle at the time. Her brother was there. So we got to spend time with them. And we were living on the road. And Tony Robbins covered all of our expenses, rental car and cell phone and everything. And my job was to give 2 speeches a day. So over those 2 years, I gave about 800 speeches. And my speaking blade, my blade got sharp, right? And I got really good at closing from the front of the room. Because I'd go into a Century 21 or a Remax office or a car dealership or an insurance company or a network marketing group. And I would go in and do a little Tony Robbins speech. And then I would close for the seminar tickets. And I was on the road, I think 24 months total. There was an 8-month stretch. 8 months, I was the #1 producer of these seminar tickets. So I had a really good run, made some great income with Tony. And at some point, you can only be on the road for so long. So I decided at age 28, I was going to branch off and start Eric Lofholm International, 1999. And go become the Zig Ziglar of my generation. So that was my initial intention. And here we are over 20 years later, and I'm still pursuing that dream. I have clients all over the world. I built an international training company from scratch after leaving the Tony Robbins organization. So that'll conclude part 2 of the Eric Lofholm story. Thanks for watching, and I look forward to connecting with you on part 3.